quarterback, Brock Purdy, was his worst game with the 49ers. It was his first loss. The Browns seem to find something. They seem to have created the blueprint for stopping Brock Purdy. Let's get into it, Dad. What'd you see from Brock Purdy? What did you think from him?
For disrupting Brock Purdy.
Yes.
It's interesting. First of all, I really like him. I still consider him a very good quarterback, although I'm not sure he's an elite quarterback, but a very good quarterback and good enough for this team. But what I saw was, for the first time, missing open targets, actually seeming confused. He had a 55 passer rating, and that's not acceptable. You can blame the offensive line. You could say, McCaffrey got hurt, whatever you want. 55 is bad. It's bad. I say it's a flunking grade, really, Iggy. And so that's what I saw. I saw for the first time, this is an inexperienced quarterback that everybody, including you and I, have overrated.
Yeah. For the first 13, 14 games of his career, he made it look so easy, right? There was always someone wide open and he found him. And in this game, it was so hard for him. Where were the open receivers? And when there were smaller openings, he was like a little bit off, a little bit behind, almost throwing picks. And you wanted me to ask the question about what exactly did Jim Schwartz do? I asked it, and Kyle right away was like, well, he played a lot tighter man coverage, just right away. So let's start there. It seems to me that that's the way to defend Brock Purdy. Now, you need good corners to pull it off, but against zone, with all the motions that the Niners do pre-snap, Brock Purdy's very smart. I think he can pretty much diagnose what the defense is doing and where to go with the ball against whatever zone coverage he can figure out before the snap. But when it's man, it's a different game, because against man coverage, you can diagnose that it's man coverage pre-snap, but you still don't know who's going to get open, because someone has to beat someone on the defense. And that's a different game for Brock Purdy. He struggled with that.
Yeah. I would say when it's zone coverage, before he even gets the ball snapped to him, he knows where he's going to go. And he's great at killing zone coverage. But if you have good corners like Cleveland or the Jets, or Philadelphia, who got beat, if you have good corners, he doesn't know immediately where to go. And I think we saw that on Sunday, and we saw he was presented. It's like learning progressions. He was presented with problems he had not been asked to solve before, and he couldn't solve them on the spot. Does that seem fair, Iggy?
Absolutely. Like, if he didn't have the answers to the test before the snap, it looked like all of a sudden he was the 7th round pick who's a little too small or not quite quick enough or doesn't have a strong enough arm or not quite accurate. And all of a sudden, all those things came out. And it's like zone coverage, what they're doing is basically saying, if you move the ball down the field, it's going to have to be a 10 or 12 play drive. And we don't think you're consistent enough to pull it off without taking a sack or throwing the ball away or getting picked. And Brock Purdy is consistent enough. Absolutely. With this team, with Kyle Shanahan giving him the answers, he can check the ball down and hit the intermediate throws consistently if you give it to him against zone coverage. If you do what the Browns do and have some good corners, all of a sudden the windows he has to throw to are way smaller and he looks mortal.
Iggy, this is the key question. Why don't other teams do man coverage against Purdy? Because they must understand the concept. Why is it that Cleveland did it and was successful?
Well, Cleveland has a great defense, but I think it's not necessarily about the corners as much as it's about your linebacker, because no team has a linebacker who can match up with Christian McCaffrey man-to-man. That's the matchup the Niners always have an advantage with. But Christian McCaffrey got hurt, knocked out of this game. And so now you're just worried, like, do we have a corner who can cover Brandon Ayuk? And Ayuk is good, but not great. We saw that if the corner's in his lap, he doesn't necessarily make contested catches. He needs to get open. And he wasn't getting open by a lot in this game, and he wasn't beating the Browns. So I think a lot of it has to do with McCaffrey. And if McCaffrey doesn't play in the next few games, it's going to be interesting to see if Brock Purdy sees a lot more man-to-man coverage and how he does, because he hasn't really had to play much without McCaffrey.
Right. So I think we could say that a lot of their game plan determined whether McCaffrey can play. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But whether or not McCaffrey plays, Brock Purdy is a different quarterback with him and without him.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. They were talking about Brock Purdy being the real deal and a franchise quarterback and an MVP candidate. But as soon as McCaffrey leaves, now the coverage has changed and Brock Purdy looks mortal. You know, what does that mean going forward? What does that mean going forward for him? And what does it mean going forward for Sam Darnold? Like if Christian McCaffrey misses a couple games and Brock Purdy continues to struggle, does Kyle Shanahan think, geez, I mean, this guy was a total product of McCaffrey? Like maybe Sam Darnold could be better. I mean, is Brock Purdy's leash shorter? I wonder. I wonder if Kyle Shanahan looks at Brock Purdy differently after this game. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know Shanahan, but my gut feeling is that he's very generous about his players um,
Publicly.
talking to the media. But I have a feeling he's very hard, like his dad, very
Yeah.
hard privately. And I don't think, again, I'm not in the room. I don't think he said to Brock, "Hey, good try, boy. It's just one of those things. You had a great first drive. You really did well at the end, and forget the other stuff." I don't read him that way. I read him as saying, "You didn't live up to our standard, and we got to talk about this, and you better do it in the future." Now, if he thinks Sam Darnold is an answer to Brock Purdy, I would heartily disagree with Shanahan. I would heartily disagree, but I don't think we're anywhere near there yet. I don't think so.
I could see Kyle Shanahan feeling like Brock Purdy not only didn't play well, but was one of the main reasons they didn't win the game. It's like people are talking about him being an MVP. Like he's one of the main reasons they didn't win the game. He had Christian McCaffrey open deep, overthrew him. He missed a lot of throws that were there. Now they were tighter windows, but they were still open. And I think from Shanahan's perspective, like not only are you not an MVP, but if you are the reason we're losing games, I'm going to take a look at Sam Darnold. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't really expect Brock Purdy to do this again. I think we got to give Cleveland's defense credit. It's really good.
Yeah, and I think we got to be careful about overreacting. You don't want to overreact to one game because Iggy, we knew a game like this was going to happen. We didn't know who it would be. We didn't think it would be Cleveland with a third string quarterback. Every team has a game like this, and you learn from it and you move on. And I am confident that the Niners will learn from it, will move on, will beat the Vikings. We'll talk about that later. I am confident of all of that. But it's important for us, because we're not fans, we're analysts, to say Brock Purdy didn't look that good in that game, and to say why, and to indicate it was man coverage, and CMC wasn't in there to help him,
Mhm.
to keep it as zone coverage. And we saw drastic differances.
Yeah.
Also,
And you got,
Iggy,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, one other thing. You had mentioned Ayuk. We, I love to watch him play, and I had been talking about him being an elite receiver. I'm not so sure now. I would now give him credit for being a heck of a good receiver.
Yeah, he gets open, but when he's not all the way open and there's a cornerback draped all over him, Ayuk has really long arms, but he still doesn't seem to come down with the contested catch
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And the thing about Purdy, I've been talking for a while, like eventually the NFL is going to have a book on him. And right now, teams don't really know what to do. I think the book is out now. And we got to remember the reason he's been facing so much zone coverage is because of McCaffrey. Because teams feel they can't match up with him man to man. If McCaffrey goes out, does Brock Purdy all of a sudden look just like an ordinary quarterback? And if so, what does that say about him? And what does that say about what Sam Darnold could do on this team? I don't know. But that's what you got to learn, because we still haven't seen that from Brock. There was that quarterback competition this offseason. He was the only one that got to play with McCaffrey. So it's like they got the results they wanted. They wanted to see that Brock was the best. All right, well, let's see what he looks like without McCaffrey.
I would also add another thing. Let's say McCaffrey doesn't play next Monday, and maybe Debo Samuel. Let's see what Kyle Shanahan looks like without them.
Yep. Let's see how
You
creative
know,
he is.
when I covered Bill Walsh, when the world was a different world, the whole thing was People got hurt. Next man up. I heard Bill say that hundreds of times. Next
Mhm.
man up. We have no excuses. We're good players. Next man up. We're going to
Yeah.
win. Well, if McCaffrey doesn't play and Debo doesn't play, next man up, Kyle. What do you got? What do you got? Do you only win when you have a stacked deck?
Exactly. You're supposed to be an offensive genius, and
Yeah,
you would show that when your hand isn't so great,
that's
right?
right. That's
Yeah.
when you need to be a coach.
Yeah. Josh says, "Did you like covering Richard Sherman when he was there?" I did. He was extremely interesting. Fish and Chip says, "GCU was on my bad list, but I miss your dad's takes." Thanks. Fish and Chips. Purdy needs a coach who isn't going to react like a mad chimpanzee on the sideline when the pressure is intense. Brock needs a calm head coach by his side. Remember who was it? Remember how upset Jim Harbaugh would get during games on the sideline?
Oh, he would yell at the officials.
Anoop says, "What adjustments did Kyle make to the Browns playing tight man coverage? Also, McKivitz was abysmal. He should be replaced by Feliciano at right tackle." I didn't see what adjustments Kyle. He didn't seem to make many adjustments, and he blamed the offensive problems on penalties.
He certainly did. Things didn't go their way. I didn't see adjustments.
Ernesto says Kyle loves not to play new players at their strengths. He wants McLeod to play like Debo and Bell like Ayuk when they go down. Impossible. It's true. It's a good point. David E, $5. Thank you. Daza says, even if healthy, we should need CMC to beat the Vikings, and it will give us a good chance to see more Mason and let CMC rest. Makes sense to me. Tony says Brock is going to be okay. He will adjust now, knowing what it's like not having key players. He's resilient. It's one game. Panic if we lose 3 in a row.
That's a
Sure.
good comment, but how does that person know that that's the truth?
It's true. Sounds like
We have to
wishful thinking
see.
to a degree. Adam Mitten says Purdy seemed like he was struggling to complete routine throws. Do you think this will negatively affect his confidence, or will he bounce back?
I think he's very confident. I don't feel that confidence will be an issue. The issue will be, can he beat man coverage?
My question isn't Purdy's confidence in himself. It's Shanahan's confidence in Purdy, because Shanahan's fickle. Shanahan overreacts. I don't know
I'm
about
with you.
Brock. Brock
Yeah,
seems
I'm
like he
with
has
you.
a lot of self-belief. But what if Kyle's already, what if Kyle's been waiting for an opportunity to go to Sam Darnold? I don't know. He's the only person in the world that likes Sam Darnold. We don't know how much or why. Fish and Chip says Kyle's tendencies returned under pressure.
It sure
Did.
seemed like it.
David E says this was Purdy's first bad game, and he still put them in position to win against the number 1 defense. McCaffrey was out in the last drive. Give me a break.
It's true. He put them in position to win. And had they won, it would have whitewashed everything. I
Yeah.
agree. That last drive was very good. He's really fun to watch. I'm not predicting failure for him. I would like to see how he reacts. Grant and I had this conversation last week. We said they're not going to, be the best team every week. Every
No.
team faces losing or being behind. How do you react? Well, at the very end, he could have been a hero, Purdy. Wasn't his fault they lost at the end.